Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to listen to the Bonfire. Why don't you grab yourself a cup of Tim Hortons as well as some maple syrup on your way back. It's me, the pole with a goal, and I've accomplished my last goal. I've graduated. I've walked the stage. I got the diploma cover, and the inside it says, "We'll send it to you by the mail." And I'm like, okay. I, as always, am joined by my lovely, lovely co-host, Tim.
Hey, congrats on graduating. I'm sorry that you didn't actually get a real piece of paper. Nobody does, but it's all a scam.
True.
Which is sort of funny when you think about like indirectly the amount of money you paid for that, and you're like, couldn't you have just like printed this? Like, is that beyond the like capability to get like a rush job done on this?
It could have.
Did they get your name right?
Like saying it?
Yeah.
They were, I would say 80%. Like I spelt it, because they had the ability of spelling your name phonetically underneath, like on your reader card, and I wrote it as best I can for like someone speaking English to say it as Polish as possible. And it was also one of my teachers that knows me that was reading it, so they did a fairly good job. And I also did like a little trophy lift with my diploma cover, and the audience really loved that. Also, if you couldn't tell by now, it's Eray.
Howdy, Shaqiri out.
Nice. It's our favorite referee / linesman.
I try. I think I did it right in the Special Olympics, but you know.
The way that you made that sound was like it was such an insult. Like it's like, oh yeah, like out of all the diseases, this is my favorite one to get.
I mean, hey, can you name your favorite referee off the top of your head, Tim?
Yeah, it's Eray, but I'm not going to say it like it's a bad thing.
All right, our favorite referee is Eray. He does a much better job than Angel Hernandez. For all of you people who know baseball. All right, so let's just get right into it. We don't have much news this episode in comparison to the last, and that is essentially that the European Championships are underway. One Fire player is in there, and that, of course, is Xherdan Shaqiri. He was an unused sub as part of their win against Hungary, so he didn't face any action whatsoever. We'll see if they will face any action in the next two upcoming group stage games.
Come to think of it, I'm not sure if we recorded before the press conference happened, but Shaqiri did say in a press conference that he wants to return to Europe, which I think a lot of Fire fans sort of misinterpreted a little bit. Like, it's not really nefarious for a guy at the end of his contract, which he basically is. Like, because his contract ends in the next 6 months one way or another, he's allowed to speak to other teams basically as a pre-free agent, and other teams are allowed to speak to him without the Fire's permission. So it's like there's nothing really that nefarious in it. And it's, I don't think anyone was under the impression that he would be sticking around after his deal was over with a new deal with the Fire.
And I agree with that, but the only thing is that, like, when you've accomplished nothing with your current team, you'd think that you'd have a little bit of respect for the fan base that you're, currently having to play for. And who knows, maybe we never see him take the field again. I honestly am I'm not convinced either way, but I feel like you shouldn't be saying, oh, I want to go back to Europe when, it's just frustrating, I think, from the Fire fan base perspective to be hearing that from the guy that we're paying so much money to that clearly never had an interest in us, really, besides maybe the money. So,
I mean, I think that he did. I think obviously the results weren't there. Like, it's one of those things where I think from his perspective, it takes two to tango. And I feel like he didn't really have a good tango partner throughout a lot of this. I'm not saying that that's fair or not fair. I do think that he did try. I think that the Fire never really had a plan for how to use him. And like, that's ultimately the issue, and
agree to disagree. I think he didn't try.
Yeah. I mean, let's put it this way. If I've said this before, and we can move on soon after this, but like, if you put his seasons, if I were to cut up each of his stats from each of his seasons and take the team off and number the pieces of paper with a team in the season on one, you couldn't tell which seasons were in MLS or anywhere else. Like, he's had about the same production in MLS that he's had everywhere else that he's been. It's just everyone expected more from him in MLS, but he's not going to he spent some of that time at Basel in Switzerland, where he's on by far the what was at the time by far the best team in the league. And he wasn't producing more than he is in MLS when he isn't on one of the better teams in the league. And the Swiss league is not a higher quality than MLS. So
Yeah, and I mean, now look at the national team. I mean, he's an unused sub. The thing that I think really rubbed me the wrong way is that he left the team early to go be with the Swiss team, and then he didn't even make an appearance in the first game. So I just thought that was kind of poetic. But good segue to the fact that we are now how many games? So we're 2 games without Shaqiri, and
4
2
games
wins.
without Shaqiri.
4 games without Shaqiri. Thank you, Tim, for correcting me. I knew we were at least 2 games without him, but 2 wins in the time he was gone.
And 2 draws, undefeated.
Undefeated.
We very much, since his departure, turned a long winless streak to a decent winning streak, as the Fire have defeated Toronto FC 4-1. First win away from home. This is also the second time this season where we've won by 4 goals. Of course, the first time was the 4-3 win against Montreal. I think this is the first multi-goal win with more than a margin of 1, essentially.
First multi-goal win, and it's the first time that the Fire have won a game in which they've opened the scoring, I think with the possible exception of the game against Houston.
Pretty sure.
The Fire have been trailing a lot, and they did not trail at all in this game.
Yeah. So, a lot of goals, as we've mentioned. They sort of started around the 41st minute, though both sides had decent amount of chances. Nonetheless, you had essentially, in my opinion, when you see all these goals, you can see one thing that is similar is urgency. You had the urgency to get the ball back. You had the urgency to create some chances, whether it was a cross or just a shot. And in this first goal, you had the urgency from Fabian Herbers to just immediately get the ball back outside of the box, send in a quick cross, which reached the head of Marin Haile Selassie to make it 1-0, which is, a great start. Always when you're scoring first, though, I feel like some teams, even when they score first, it doesn't end well. Cough, cough, Poland against the Netherlands today. That wasn't fun. But I digress as a poll. Because a few minutes later, you had Insigne. He was making a run on the left. He sort of played it into the box, curled it, and Brady had an unfortunate slip. Essentially, he wasn't able to hold on to the ball as it rolled in past the line to make it 1-1 game, which was a shame. And we also saw again, I think there was a VAR check of a possible offsides, but then to
see if Insigne was offsides. Yeah, there was confusion about it on the broadcast. He was ruled not. He was onside.
I believe the flag went up. The flag did go up at the end of the play because the refs are instructed to keep their flag down, and then I think you end up putting the flag up when after the ball ended up in the net, at which point that they sent the center referee over to the VAR booth to essentially say, nope, he was on. It's a good goal.
Yeah, and we once again saw the referee in a very similar style to the NFL or the NHL making the play, announcing to the rest of the stadium, which was pretty cool. When we heard
in a very thick Quebec accent, yeah.
Yes, that is true. He very much had a Quebecois accent, and you could actually hear him on the TV because when we were in the stadium, when we heard it against, what game was it? It wasn't against Orlando. It was against, it was against the Galaxy. It was against the Galaxy. I apologize for the brain lapse, but I wasn't able to hear it from where I was sitting. I heard sort of like a rumbling in the speakers, and all of a sudden I point. Moving on, though, into the second half is where we saw more of an urgency, of course, to just keep getting the ball and just running like hell with it. Hugo Kuipers ended up taking the ball all the way in the right side, moving into the box all by himself, puts essentially all his weight on his right foot by the looks of it, and just launches it with his left to the bottom left corner to make it 2-1 Fire again. So just in continuing pushing forward, and like I mentioned in previous episodes, just making sure those strides turn into or to make sure the baby steps turn into strides, and we're definitely seeing those strides right now. A few minutes later, 58th, 59th minute, you see Gutierrez, Marin Haile Selassie, and Fabian Herbers passing it around to each other. Guti, I think he was trying to make it a sort of pass to the middle to Fabi. He wasn't there, but since of the new formation and a lot of players just running it forward, you had Mauricio Pineda right outside the box. He was like, fine, I'll do this myself. And he just thunders it to the bottom corner of the net. 3-1 Chicago. And it's like, wow, it's a 2-0 goal. What could go wrong?
2-goal lead, you mean?
It's a 2 goal lead. Oh my days. Like I mentioned, I wish I knew how to speak this language a bit better. But
yeah, it's it so far has not been the most dangerous lead for the Fire this year. That's been incredible. Now it's the first time that they've had a 2-goal.
Damn it, Tim! You just jinxed it.
I know.
All right, here we go.
Well, it hasn't come up a lot.
That is true. But in the 88th minute, once again, we had a lot of Fire players moving up. You had Fabi Herbers. He had 3 players in front of him. I'm pretty sure it was Kutias, Aragoni as well. And he ends up passing it to Aragoni, moves into the box, does a little left to right to left, and then just whoosh, curls it. Like, these goals, in my opinion, have been different from what we've been seeing, especially the past few games where maybe we have scored, but it would end up in a defeat or in a draw or something like that. And just the play style as well. Just a lot more urgency, a lot more moving up, essentially. Like, it feels like other plays have always been super slow, like slow to get around in and around the box, slow to make the cross, or slow to make a recovery. It felt like there's a different sense of essentially urgency. Like, even though we're winning, heck, let's win more, because there have definitely been more chances that have either met the goalkeeper's body in some way to deflect, or even the post. Definitely, it could have been more of even like a baseball blowout score.
I just have to say, I mean, something that I saw in this game that I have not seen at all this season was just the press. Like, the press was working. Like, if we go back to Kuiper's goal, I mean, that goal doesn't happen if Kuipers gives up on the ball when it goes into the corner there. I mean, I was really, really impressed to see just how impressed to see how the team pressed. Get it? Anyway.
You're right. They certainly moved it into a higher press than they'd been willing to do before, because for years, I think we've seen the team kind of sit in this sort of like
whatever
this like whatever mid block sort of thing, where it's like maybe you can try to play like it was never a case of like teams that can win in a mid block if you have a midfield that's going to absolutely like make your life miserable trying to play through them. The Fire were like, I mean, we'll like act like that for about a few seconds, but then if you want to play through us, oh well, we're not going to make a big fuss about it. Like, it was never like a killer mid block, and I think teams adapted to that, and it showed. This high press, like the team had under 40% possession on the day, and you wouldn't think it if you looked at highlights, because I feel like the Fire had a lot of the better action, like the vast majority of the good action in front of either goal, right? So they've basically sacrificed having possession in a place where it's not dangerous for space to attack into and trying to get the ball in dangerous areas. And so far it's been working. Yeah,
so the 3-5-2 formation has definitely seemed to help Kuipers, and he is still on track to be the only Fire player since Robert Barrett to make double digit goals in a season. So hopefully we can get that and even more.
I mean, Kuipers was close a number of times too. Like it really looked like it could have been a brace for him pretty easily. The one thing I will say is Luca Gavron, who's Toronto's backup goalkeeper for Sean Johnson, former Fire player, who's currently with the U.S. men's national team. Like, I feel like that guy probably is not going to get a good rating from anyone. I'm sure like a lot of fans for like Toronto fans were like bad mouthing the guy on the way out. He had a pretty good game. Like, he was brave. He like went and he challenged Fire players time and time again. When there was a Fire player, like including Hugo Kuipers, who was dangerous alone in the box, and he was not shying away from Hugo Kuipers alone in the box. And if he had been a little bit more timid, or you might even say like maybe smarter with it and trying to play angles and stuff like that, like the game could have ended with a couple more goals for the Fire.
Yeah, and Luca Gavron, the Toronto second keeper, like you mentioned, he definitely made some stops that could have resulted in a different way. Like at the very end of the game, Kutias had a really good solo run going into the box, just outmaneuvering everybody, only to get deflected by Gavran. So I guess, that's good on him. And you mentioned Sean Johnson was out. Toronto had a decent amount of players technically out. You had Bernadeschi and Gomez who were out on red cards as well as yellow card caution. Johnson's out.
So yeah, just to be clear, 2 yellows. They got a red from 2 yellows. Yeah.
Yes, that's why. And you also had Jonathan Osorio, Richie
Larea, the team
Larea.
captain. Yeah.
Yes.
No, but Richie Larea hasn't really been playing a lot for Toronto this season. Jonathan Osorio has been the team captain. He's a key part of that team. He's also a key part of the Canadian men's national team, which is why he's away.
True. And then there were also 3 other players out because of injury. So
none as big as those are names that we already listed, just
true,
for what it's worth. I mean, Bernadeschi, I think, is a huge loss for them just because he's been their best 2-way player. Like he sort of is becoming like what Bosty was for the Fire when things were going well for the Fire when Bosty was here, like 2017, I guess is what I mean. Where you get a guy that's offensively very talented, but just like a good all-around soccer player, and he's willing to put himself in places to play defensively, be good on both sides of the ball, create passes for others. And he's been that guy for Toronto. So missing him now, I mean, obviously, like the yellows didn't invent themselves. It's not like the referee was like making things up there. Like he earned the 1 day in club red.
True. Though injuries to the whole team could always change up like how substitutions and stuff are and just how the squad's lined up in terms of on the bench. And I mean, the Fire themselves were missing few guys as well. Like 3 starters from the back line are out. Like Arnaud Souquet essentially made his debut as a center back.
Yeah, it's actually, I looked it up. I thought it was his debut as a center back. He played it 1 time last year for the Fire.
Seasonal debut.
It's his seasonal debut. As it was like, we saw Wyatt Olmsberg get his first minutes for the Fire first team this year.
Let's go.
The Sheriff.
Sheriff Olmsberg.
But like, like the Fire really did in a way, like it's sort of crazy. Like the Garth Lagerwey, the general manager now team president of Atlanta, was general manager of Seattle before that, has this theory that was kind of informed from like data analytics team in Seattle that MLS teams basically, if you have 9 regular starters, you can more or less maintain the same quality. But if you're missing 3 or more starters, the quality drops off. Both teams were missing 3 or more starters. The Fire were missing 3 starters on the back line. Assuming that Toby Salquist is going to return to be a regular starter, which there's no reason to think that he wouldn't. Rafa Chihos, the former team captain, out. Like, he'll be back. He just had a green card appointment that took longer than the team thought it would. There's a story about that. I'm in a Red 97 from Alex Calabrese. So, I encourage people to read that if they haven't already. And obviously both Andrew Gutman as well as Chase Gasper, who was the backup left back. So the team didn't have a natural left back. So the fact that the team could put together this good of a performance with essentially a makeshift back line playing out of a new formation that basically requires 1 more back, I think is a real credit to the team overall.
Yeah. And honestly, the question is who didn't play well in this new formation in this like specific formation in this game today. There's not really one person that comes to mind.
Yeah,
Brady.
I don't know how much weight you put on Brady with that first goal.
I honestly don't. It's
to his credit, there was a wicked deflection. I get it. But still, like as a keeper, I think you're expected to not have butterfingers in those types of situations, which it's unfortunate. It's uncharacteristic of Brady. So I'm not going to, hold this over his head. But really, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, overall, the team had just a strong showing everywhere. I mean, like, I can't think of anybody that really didn't perform the way they needed to. Certainly some more than others, like performed very well. Like Herbers had 2 assists. Kuipers was, doing Kuipers things, pressing, getting the ball and creating chances. And no, it was a good performance overall.
And that actually brings up a point. So Herbers, I think, had a phenomenal game. He was involved on both ends. And even when there were times that he didn't touch the ball, I think his pressing was very successful. And that's something that he's always been able to do. But like, I heard somebody say Herbers runs around and there is no point about it a couple years ago. And I think that sort of looked like it was true because the team wasn't really pressing around him. He was deciding more or less, I guess, to go rogue and press. And now that the team is actually pressing. You're like, oh, that's what he's doing. He just needed other people doing it around him. And I think that that's good. So he got the captain's armband at the beginning of the game. DJ made sure that we mentioned the fact that after Herbers was subbed off, Mersu Pineda got the captain's armband. So the two longest tenured Fire players that were playing on the pitch today got the armband. I think DJ wanted us to tell everyone that we found our new CJ Brown. Obviously, the other CJ Brown is still employed by the Fire, but obviously not playing.
Yeah, but still, the return of a king, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
the one who has been spoken of,
I guess. Yes. So, I mean, hey, honestly, really good game overall. The funny thing I was mentioning to the lads beforehand was I was in the midst of my graduation ceremony while this was all going on. And when I put my phone down in a way like to go stand up and like go walk across the stage, everything, the score is 1-1. And then I came back and it was 3-1. So I was like, this is good. This is good news. And then by the end of it, it was 4-1. So I did my best to catch glimpses as much as I can during the game without looking like a complete, don't care person. But also the internet connection in the stadium was not the best. So glimpses, essentially.
I will say, when
you're a plastic fan, Alan.
Yes.
Didn't want to see the game. Come on, man.
Stomp.
Well, honestly, I kind of, got that, horrible feeling in my stomach when Toronto equalized. I was like, oh, great. This is how this is going to go. Because usually we don't score very many goals. I mean, this is the most amount. I mean, this is tied with Montreal for the most we've scored this season in one game. And 4 is, that's not a very common number of goals for an MLS team to be scoring. So, that felt really good. I mean, considering what did we have on goals before this game? I don't even know, but that was like, we just added to our goal differential for sure.
Yeah, no, getting 3 closer, so the team's still at -9, which is not great, but obviously a lot better than -12. The team is, by the way, 4 wins, 1 drawn, no losses on the year when they've scored multiple goals.
Ooh,
yeah. Well, that's the thing. We had that stretch where we were scoring nothing for how many games? It was 6 games, 5-6 games or something like that. We were scored 0. Is that stat right?
Yeah, it was a lengthy. It's made the top 5 in longest stretches in team history, and that's rough because the team had a stretch last year that was the longest in team history and made it into the top 10 in league history. So, but bad. Having said it, yeah, the Fire didn't have a single lead for 810 minutes of competitive soccer between the game on April 6th against Houston up until the game against the Galaxy, which they won. And they had almost never scored first on the season. When they've scored first, they've done well. I mean, that's the one thing that you can say about this team. They haven't had a lead very much, but they have battled back from being down and they've scored a goal to get an equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't made it wins often enough. They did against Toronto, and I think that's great to see.
Yeah. Now the question is, of course, is this sustainable? Is Frankie Klopas going to be able to take these players, the ones that are playing now, the ones that are going to come back from injury, the ones that possibly might leave and be replaced by someone else in the summer transfer window, moving forward against, all these different teams that we still have to play in MLS, including our next opponent, one that we've already played this season fairly recently, Orlando, this time in Orlando, in Florida. So they're fairly close to our friend DJ. Orlando, they have a record of 4 wins, 5 draws, 8 losses, a goal differential of -10. As mentioned, we played them recently. It was a 1-1 draw, including that one goal that will never go away on social media. Literally popped up on my YouTube recommended. I think it was by Bleacher Report or something. It will never go away, unfortunately. Their previous result, though, was a 3-1 defeat at home against LAFC. And they're on a 4-game winless streak, going all the way back to May 18th, before their game against the Fire, where they drew, that being their only point in that span. Their most recent win was, Mike mentioned, May 18th at San Jose before they beat Miami and Orlando. as well as the Union in Philadelphia. Since then,
it was a draw against Miami in Orlando.
Oh, draw against Miami.
Which I mean, like, let's be honest, is a win against Orlando when you against Miami this season. So
that makes sense. Yeah, I guess maybe that's why I wrote it like that. Sort of how we wrote that the US won 1-1 against Brazil.
It's like a 1-1 win against Brazil, like the 1-1 win they had against England in the 2010 World Cup, and I think it was a 0-0 draw in Miami, in Orlando, if I'm not 100% mistaken.
So yeah, but I mean, since then they've lost to the Crew, they drew to us, lost to Red Bull, and now lost to LAFC. In basically opposite of what Toronto's thing was. Toronto was the wooden spoon winners. Now they're looking a lot better. Last year, this was a team that was a possible silverware goer. Someone that possibly could have gotten either the Supporter Shield or even the MLS Cup. Now they're seeming to not catch a break, essentially.
So I guess there's two questions. So first, talking about whether or not this is sustainable, I think obviously the team is never going to. They're going to be defeated at some point again this season,
of
right?
course.
Like in that sense, but to get to the broader point, they have found something that works, right? Like they've simplified the game for a lot of people. They simplified the game for Kuipers. Playing two strikers has given him time and space. Marin Haile Selassie has proven himself to be pretty good at that role of working out in the box. And like we saw on Saturday against Toronto, he can be dangerous in his own right when given the time and the space. So it's not just like he's like a one of those like second strikers that like is almost like a decoy. Like he's a legitimate scoring threat given the space. And he can make his own space. Like we saw him make his own space. We saw Kuipers make his own space. Teams are going to adapt because the Fire's playbook was new. And this is something that we've seen from the Fire before, where they start doing something that's new and it works and it looks good, but then they're not able to iterate on it. The one thing I will say is that this new setup has a lot of potential for the Fire to iterate. And I don't think we've seen the maximum out of the team. Like we're starting to see more players in the box. I counted 3 and 4 players in the box for most of the Fire's goals against Toronto. Ideally, I want to see, not necessarily in the box, but I'd like to see 5 players that are in the box or around the box, somewhere between the penalty arc to playing in wide areas and stuff like that. That's what a lot of the teams around the world have started doing. Is it's like you start off with like a 3-5-2 or a whatever, like some variation of that, a 5-3-2. Like it doesn't really matter because you're just putting numbers out there. But in possession, it becomes basically like a attacking 5. So it's like a 3-2-5 or something like that like ends up with there being 5 attackers, and you want them all around or committing into the box when you have possession and you're able to work your way in. The Fire had a lot more time in the box against Toronto than I think we've seen them have. They can still do better, and I'm sure that they're talking about this because this is still kind of a new formation for them and stuff. So there is a way that they can iterate, and there's a way that they can make this better that makes it seem like it doesn't have to be a flash in the pan, which we've seen from the team before.
Of course. Well spoken, Tim. Well spoken. Eray, anything to add about this being sustainable?
I would like to think it is, but I've seen time and time again this false glimmer of hope we get around mid-season.
True.
And I'd like to be optimistic. And look, I'm really trying not to be the negative person or ever be a negative person when it comes to the Fire, but it's really hard to be positive when it comes to the Fire. I think it's going to depend on if we somehow get at least one more win with Orlando or Seattle, that might help my optimism a little bit. The next 2, away matches, we need to be playing like we did. I mean, granted, yes, Toronto's team last night was definitely not at their best. Like they had a bad game. They were missing players. We can't say, oh wow, the Fire really just somehow played a lot better. I think we need to play. I think we need to like give it another game or 2 before we can say, okay, this team's cooking.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think that it has to be positive results. And I mean, they've got an opportunity against an Orlando team that, like, as Alan pointed out, like, has not been getting good results this season. Now, and like, Alan, I also want to address this. Like, you brought up, like, possible roster changes in the summer window and stuff like that.
True.
Right now, the Fire do essentially have one DP they're playing with, and Hugo Kuipers. Like, Gaston Jimenez is a DP in, technically, but can be bought down. And obviously, Shaqiri is not with the team. Obviously, adding two players that are strikers like Hugo Kuipers, but like two players of that same quality and dimension would change the composition of the team. I think you can't count on that. And if you could add them, unless they're free agents, they couldn't arrive until basically the League's Cup, at which point there's 10 games in the season. So the Fire need to get results with the squad they've got before they can start making changes to the squad.
So Orlando, like we mentioned, this is a team in a very different position than we mentioned to Toronto. They're sort of on a bit of a slum, especially since last season. They've also got a decent amount of players out because of international duty, but nevertheless, they still have some players to look out for.
Yeah, one of the players that is still that is out with international duty is Pedro Eray, who I think that all of us think of him as being really one of the best goalkeepers in the league. He hasn't been this year. He's with Peru ahead of Copa America. I think a lot of Orlando fans would say, has become a liability. He's, I want to say he's 34 or 35. No, he's 34. I think that he's kind of reaching that age where maybe there's starting to be a drop off. So the thing is, the Fire will be facing a backup goalkeeper, and they just did that and they won. But I don't think that they lost. That Toronto lost because of Gavron. I think that maybe, obviously, like, you've got a younger person with something to prove. But overall, Orlando last year outperformed their underlying numbers by an insane amount. Like, they had 15 more goals, or like their goal differential was 15 higher than the underlying statistical models would suggest they should have had. This season, they're underperforming their model by about 8 so far. So it's really like, if you add the two seasons together, they're more or less like dead on statistically with where they should be. It's just like last year they were like hitting a high, and this year they're hitting a bit of a low. But the underlying numbers for both just have said that, like, it looks like Orlando City is a bubble playoff team, and that's kind of who they are. They've been playing a little bit worse than that, and their back line has been pretty porous this season. But again, like, it really could just be bad luck and like reversion to the mean, which I hate saying, but sometimes fits.
So, what do we expect? I mean, this is the first time.
I'll tell you what I expect, Alan.
What do you expect?
I expect Georgios Koutsias' shirt to be tucked in, because that is the key to success.
We are 2-0 since the word has been essentially passed along through internet and DM telephone.
If he scores a goal, if Koutsias scores a goal, he better keep his shirt tucked in. Because I feel like if he scores a goal, he takes his shirt off or untucks it during a celebration or something, it's over. Absolutely over.
I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch Orlando's game against LAFC or not. On the books,
no.
So on the books is a 3-1 loss. They played pretty well throughout the game, and Orlando or LAFC have gone from being a team that really couldn't buy a win to like a team that's finding their form, and like they've got a lot of room to add. But I think a lot of people are expecting them to be one of the teams that could very well be in MLS Cup coming from the Western Conference. And they played like it against Orlando. Orlando played well. They just weren't as good as that. So I think that if you're an Orlando player or fan, you could maybe come away from that match and think, look, we didn't get the result, but we did play well, and there's no reason that we couldn't get a result against a Fire team that is weaker than LAFC. And I don't think that anyone is saying like the Fire are as good of a team as LAFC right now. So I guess we'll see on that. Like again, like they played well. They didn't really get the result that they wanted.
I think we could still win.
Oh, I think it's a winnable game for the Fire, absolutely. But
like I mentioned, we've went from baby steps to strides. I think we're still in the stride area before hopefully we don't snag a rock or something like that and trip and then fall back to
snag a rock. That was a phrase. Sorry.
snag on a rock. I don't know.
We hit the iceberg, you know, it could have used anyway. But no,
before we
think
hit an iceberg and sank or whatever.
Well, you know, it's just at that point of the season where, you know, the season we felt like, honestly, 2 games ago, I was thinking the season's done, right?
Everyone felt that.
And with good reason. I mean, but now we've been given this glimmer of hope, which does happen from time to time in Fire fandom. And I think that's really going to be the question is going to be whether it's actually going to be different this time. And we don't know, but we'll find out. I think playing against Orlando is going to be a good indicator. If we come out with 3 points, it's going to be hard not to be optimistic if we win 3 in a row.
So last season, the Fire, for the first time, I want to say since 2010, had back-to-back road wins against the Portland Timbers and against Sporting Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
It's been rare. I mean, it's happened in history, and the Fire will need to get back-to-back road wins this season if they want to do something with their season, just given the number of games left and where they are. I will say it's going to be interesting that. So the Fire for the past few games, when they've been playing 3 center backs, like a 5-3-2, 3-5-2, like whatever you want to call it. They've been playing against mostly teams that have been doing the same. Orlando has normally played some kind of a 3 in the back system, like a 3-1-4, like 3. It doesn't matter. Some variation of it. They played a 4-4-2 diamond against LAFC, and they looked really good doing it. I think it's going to be interesting to see and really a question of confidence to see if the Fire play keep the 3-5-2, 5-3-2, whatever you want to call it, against Orlando, knowing they may be playing 4 in the back. And I think that they should. I think that it would be a good show of confidence from Frank Klopas and the coaching staff to the team and just to everyone if they don't try to mimic what their opponent is lining up with. Which we've seen.
Just say F it, we ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Just ball it, honestly. Just be confident, honestly.
If there's anything we know about Frank, he's going to keep the same formation as long as it's working or not failing, I should say. Not necessarily working, but just not, you know, I feel like now is not the time to be testing another formation, given how many times Frank has changed the formation this year. But I see your point about if Orlando's playing 4 in the back. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's why I think this is going to be a good test to see kind of what
100% on multiple levels, right? Like, do you just stick with what's working, which I think that they should? Do you have the confidence to say, like, we know our game and this has been working for our game? Because, like, one thing, like, that 3 center backs has allowed the Fire to do is against teams that really have one main scoring threat, and Orlando's kind of broadly in that category. Like, the Fire have been winning partly because they just have Carlos Turan like man mark the person to oblivion and like make their lives miserable, which is a fair way to play the game, right?
He's been great ever since he got that red card against Atlanta. I don't know if he had to like blow off some steam or what. Like I thought he was the stupidest guy, and I wanted him gone after that. I was like, oh my God, we cannot have people making those decisions. But hey, he's been great since then. I just have to give him a shout out there like that. I was not expecting how well he's been playing.
Yeah, no, he's been a lot better. And I mean, having said that, a number of times have thought he's outgrown bad decisions, and then he'll make a decision that you're just like legitimately like, how dumb can you possibly be with that? Like,
he just needs to keep it up. Yeah.
Yeah, but he needs to keep it up, and he's been doing a really good job of like, again, like, and maybe that is a virtue of having 3 center backs where your role is more defined. You've got more support around you. And if your job is like, you just need to make sure that this person doesn't get any happiness in the box and do stuff around that, which is, I think, been more or less the ask. simplifying the game like that can really reduce the chance that you get a card because you know what your role is and you're not trying to overcompensate and make stupid decisions as a result.
Amen, I say to that. So why not keep pushing it on the road since, I mean, we're only in the middle of this little road trip that we have before we have to go all the way to the other side of the country to Seattle before we actually finally come home to play another game. So why not keep the ball rolling? Predictions?
Into the net, maybe?
Into the net. That is true. Into the net would be the best place to keep the ball rolling. Do we have any predictions, gentlemen?
I think we're not going to score 4 goals again. I would love to be wrong, but I feel like a more realistic shout. Oh, I'm debating between. I think we're going to win. I'm going to try to be optimistic here.
Okay.
I think it's going to be by 1 goal. We'll win. I think we're going to win either a hard fought 2-1 or 3-2. But I don't know. I'm going to go probably 2-1 because Fire don't often score more than 2 goals in a game. I'm being realistic. My backup option's 3-2. Can I do that? Am I allowed?
Yeah. I'll
Okay,
allow it.
cool.
I don't know, Alan, do you want to come down hard against that?
No, you cannot do 2. No, I'm perfectly fine with it.
I think Kuipers gets a brace regardless. Don't know who the third goal scorer would be. Maybe a Marin or a Gucci. I don't know. And Orlando's goals will be bad defensive blows from Arno Suke.
I would be surprised if Arno Suke started because Rafaji should be back. I think that Suke did have a decent game and he did set up really at least one of the Fire's goals. So
Sure. More Kuipers than anything, but I guess.
yeah, no,
Suke
I mean, you
did
want the
kick
guy you just
ball.
paid $12 million for to score, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, Suke's ball wasn't. I mean, like the commentators were saying, "Oh, that ball was great," but no, it wasn't. It just Kuipers fought for it and got it. So yes, it is Suke's fault that we scored. But
Did you check his Instagram?
I
Kuiper's
did.
Instagram?
I did. I did not like the picture.
Aw. Kuiper's had a
Just not-
story,
just not
had a
a
post on
CK guy,
Instagram.
man.
That's very obvious, where he showed himself hugging Arnaud Suke, and then he was hugging a teammate in Belgium previously, and the caption was something like, found a new teammate to hug, which is just so... somebody said wholesome. I can't remember who said wholesome, but just that word works. So wholesome.
So wholesome. All right, Mr. Timothy, do you have a prediction for us?
Yeah, I guess I'll take 3-2. I mean, this is a winnable game for the Fire. They do have legitimate scoring threats in Duncan McGuire and Facu Torres. Facu Torres has not been playing his game really for them. Duncan McGuire has still been scoring. He's been locked in. I think he's still trying to get an escape to Europe, despite the soccer gods really not wanting that for him, apparently. But I think that the Fire overall have a more talented roster, and they've been playing well, and Orlando haven't. And again, like it's Orlando last year, I think people overestimated how good they were because they just overperformed their numbers so much.
Yeah.
They're really not that much better than the Fire are. Other thing worth saying that's just in terms of like random facts, but this is the first time that the Fire have faced a team below them in the standings since March 23rd against the New England Revolution, which was a 1-1 draw. But I think that game was like the Revolution scored 1, the Fire scored 1, and the Weather scored like 12 because it was just so wet and miserable that I don't think that anyone was really going to score more goals, and I think that was a big factor in that match.
New England wasn't above us that May game. Are you saying away or are you saying that?
Sorry, away. Sorry, yeah, but they also weren't above us in the May game.
Okay,
the 2 games against the Revs. That's the only team that we've played that we've been above.
Well, it's been us then them at the bottom for the longest time until a recent winning streak. So
yeah. All right, I'm gonna be the incredible optimist here and say we're going to have a 2-0 victory. I think a clean sheet is entirely possible, and just keep these strides rolling. and going. I think Hugos is going to have another goal, and I think Kutsias is due for one as well when he gets subbed on. So I'm going to be the extreme optimist here. Usually, back in the USSR, when we had this one other guy who founded this whole thing on, he would always make these kind of predictions, but now it's me.
I mean, Brady deserves a clean sheet with the way that he's been playing.
That is true. He absolutely deserves one.
He's yet to have a clean sheet with a victory this season. Like they had a draw against Atlanta in Chicago at the end of April. And I think the only other clean sheet that he had this season was in Harrison, New Jersey against the Red Bulls, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's get it happening. Let's get it happening.
He deserves he deserves to get a clean sheet and have his team score a goal. Like that's
Amen,
unreal.
I say to that.
Is that too big of an ask? Come on, soccer god.
For some teams, yes. Hopefully not for ours. All right, ladies and germs, thank you for listening to The Bonfire. Thank you, Eray, for coming on a bit last minute as well. Unfortunately, DJ was feeling under the weather today, so thank you again, Eray, for jumping on.
He does live in Florida, so that does make sense.
True. And then
he would also be at the game in Orlando, but there's too many Gators between where he lives and that stadium, so it's just like a no-go.
Yes, and then thank you, of course, Tim, for being on as always. And thank you guys for listening once again. If you haven't followed the social medias, you are incredibly late, and you should just do it at this point. If not, I'm going to be incredibly disappointed at you.
All the cool kids are doing it.
That's true. Everyone, including Eray.
Sure.
Literally.
Yeah.
MIR97 on Twitter, as well as MIR97 pods for these band of boobs specifically, as well as meninred97.com for all the articles from Tim, including Alex. A lot of great stuff to read there. I, has always been Alan the Pole with the goal. Come on, you men in red.
Come on, you men in red.
Nice. Nice.